When Roe v. Wade was gutted by the Supreme Court last year, a whole lot of people made the tongue-in-cheek comment that the United States was basically about to become a modern-day version of The Handmaid's Tale. Now, hyperbole is all fun and games until that shit hits for real.
A Dallas woman who sued over the state's strict abortion ban has traveled out of state to get the procedure. Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes.
And I'm Steve Vieger. A district judge granted Kate Cox permission for an emergency abortion last week, but Attorney General Ken Paxton argued that the fatal diagnosis for her fetus and the danger trisomy 18 poses to Cox's life and her fertility does not qualify for a Texas medical exemption. The lower court's decision was put on hold by the all-Republican Texas Supreme Court. That court, in breaking news, just issued a last-minute decision tonight in the case, while noting that it is now a moot point since the plaintiff left the state.
Now, what happened to Kate Cox has become an international story, as it should be, because we've reached that point in the plot where in Republican-led states like Texas, you're going to increasingly see more and more women having to go to court for permission concerning their own reproductive health. Not your OBGYN, but a judge. Not a doctor, but a judge who probably can't tell you how a woman's period works. But beyond the obvious reason to be fucking bothered, I'm also bothered because since we're on the topic of women being punished for their bodily choices, I need this same energy around Kate Cox to also be around 33-year-old Brittany Watts of Warren, Ohio. Name doesn't ring a bell? Let me learn you.
Police say a Warren woman had a miscarriage and now she's charged with abuse of a corpse. The case is headed to a Trumbull County grand jury. First News Trumbull County reporter Nadine Grimley was inside Warren Municipal Court today for the preliminary hearing. And we want to warn you that you might find some of these details disturbing.
Brittany Watts overcome with emotion after learning her case is moving forward. Watts is charged with felony abuse of a corpse, accused of trying to plunge a toilet after having a miscarriage delivery at 22 weeks while using the restroom.
Now, I know those details are shocking and horrifying, but allow me to explain. Now, Watts was 22 weeks pregnant when she miscarried while using the bathroom. Unfortunately, miscarrying this way is a very common occurrence for women. And according to most doctors, though this should be common fucking sense, most women in this situation do not know immediately what to do with the remains of the fetus when they miscarry at home. In many cases, those remains are flushed. Now, a forensic pathologist in this case also testified that an autopsy found no injury to Brittany Watts' fetus and that the unborn fetus had died before even passing through the birth canal. That's because Brittany Watts had been told by her physician when she was 21 weeks that her pregnancy would not survive. Now, Watts is being charged with felony abuse of a corpse, even though, as her defense attorney Tracy Timko pointed out, there is no law that requires a woman suffering from a miscarriage of a non-viable fetus to bury or cremate the remains. Now, Brittany is currently out on $5,000 bond, and if convicted, she could face 2 years in prison. She has entered a not guilty plea, and the case is now headed to a grand jury, who will decide whether or not this case should proceed. Now, I fear the system will make an example out of Brittany Watts because in November, Ohio voters voted to protect abortion access in their state constitution, which pissed off a lot of Republicans in that state who vowed after the fact to try to find a way to repeal it. One Ohio lawmaker even threatened to strip the judiciary of its jurisdiction over the abortion amendment as a way to prevent the courts from having to uphold a state constitution that has protected abortion. Because if there's one thing that we know about Republicans, they can't handle an L. January 6th. So if Brittany's case moves forward, all those folks whose heads explode over women having full authority over their reproductive health, they will have another creative way at their disposal to punish women. Because see, that always was the end game. It's not about protecting unborn babies or the sanctity of life. And we know damn sure it isn't about the mother's health. It's about control, cruelty, and punishment.
Republicans are now proposing in the state of Missouri, for example, that abortion be charged as homicide, that abortion be charged criminally as murder. Republicans in the Missouri House and the Missouri Senate are now proposing murder charges for abortion in legislation that they are bringing up this month. This comes after Republicans have proposed similar legislation in Kentucky and in Georgia and in Arkansas and in South Carolina and in Colorado. Republicans in all of those states have proposed murder charges for abortion, which usually, of course, means life in prison or even the possibility of capital punishment.
So, nothing for the men, huh? Wishful thinking. Now, in Texas, where Kate Cox is, their anti-abortion laws are among the most extreme in the nation. There are no exceptions for rape and incest. Doctors who perform abortions illegally could face life in prison or be fined up to $100,000. Private citizens also are authorized to file civil suits against anyone who aids and abets an abortion. Now, Texas offers limited exceptions for medical emergencies, but according to Texas's Supreme Court, Kate Cox's situation doesn't qualify. Even though her fetus suffers from a rare but fatal condition known as trisomy 18, which causes stillbirth or death of a baby shortly after it is born. It also poses tremendous health risks to the mother, and not only could carrying this fetus to term impact her own life, but it also substantially risks her ability to have more children, something she said both her and her husband want to do. So if Kate Cox doesn't qualify for an exception in Texas, then nobody does.
I think forcing me to continue the pregnancy, the pain and suffering, put me through the risks of continuing the pregnancy, the risk of childbirth again, especially given how my last two went. I think it's cruel.
Now, for a lot of you, empathizing with Kate Cox is easy because she's facing a dire medical situation. It's perhaps easy to be outraged by what's happened to Brittany Watts because between 10 and 20% of women miscarry, or even having some level of understanding for those who are impregnated as a result of rape or incest. But the fight for abortion access and reproductive rights shouldn't just be about extreme cases, because there's a lot of women who don't fall into that category. Me, for example. Now, I've written about my abortion both for The Atlantic and in my memoir. I was 24 years old, not ready for a child. My pregnancy was not the result of sexual abuse, nor was I in medical danger. I made a choice that was right for me and my life, and that's that. Most of you all watching me right now know somebody who has had an abortion, and if you don't, it's because they haven't told you. Since 1 in 4 women will have an abortion by the time they reach 45. Now, every woman should have the same right that I had, and the same right that Kate Cox is fighting for in Texas. Oh, and since I'm on the subject of white women in Texas, 62% of y'all voted for Donald Trump, you know, the one who reshaped this court that eventually gutted Roe versus Wade. 64% of y'all voted for Texas Governor Greg Abbott, also a Republican, who is totally on board with all of this. Now, I know making sure that your husbands, sons, brothers, grandfathers, and uncles are able to sleep comfortably under the cozy blanket of white supremacy is reason enough for y'all to sell out the rest of us women. But by doing so, you've now made it possible that this is the mentality now ingrained into law in Texas.
And ladies and gentlemen, I want to submit to you that before I ever got in politics, my convictions were forged in the crucibles of the pro-life movement. I ran into a bunch of crazy Catholics, and they talked me into rescuing at abortion clinics. And I rescued in Austin and Corpus Christi and was arrested 37 times. Now, isn't it an irony that today I stand before you as one who could very well win the Texas Supreme Court?
Oh, that guy? He's nobody. Just Texas Supreme Court Justice John Devine, who just rejected Kate Cox's request to have an abortion. So if you're one of those white women who voted Republican and eased the pathway for this to happen, and now you're complaining that shit has gone left, John Devine is up for election in 2024. But based on how I know y'all consistently show us at the polls that y'all don't care about other women, I'm unfortunately not that hopeful. Stay unbothered.